What's going on, everybody? After the whistle, I am back. Been a little while since I did a podcast. It's been a couple years maybe, and got on the kick to finally go after it again, do it again, and here we are. I felt like the last time that I did this, it was a little bit more. It was too broad, so to speak, to a point where I felt like I tried to cover too many sports, whereas the sole focus of this new and revamped edition of After the Whistle is actually going to be focused strictly on football. I'm going to cover recruiting, college football, NFL, probably dabble in some fantasy stuff, some gambling lines, money lines, things of that sort. So this is just kind of almost like a preview episode, 15 to 20 minutes, probably max. Got a big weekend coming up. College football, big weekend. A lot of big games, a lot of big names. Of course, everybody that knows me knows that I'm a Georgia Bulldog fan, so therefore my dogs are playing Clemson in what's got to be probably the biggest game of the weekend, in my opinion. We haven't seen as a Bulldog fan, we haven't seen an opening week game of this magnitude since the Oregon game a few years ago, and we all know how that one turned out, so I'm definitely excited to see this. Before we get into this weekend slate, I want to cover what happened last weekend, and let's talk about the Florida State Seminoles for a minute. And I know I've got some friends out there, and I've got some family members that are Seminole fans, and this might sting a little, but I will say that I was fooled, and I was 100% on the Mike Norvell hype train last year. And looking back at what transpired last weekend, I don't think that I could be more wrong. I don't know if that's necessarily the word, or misguided maybe is the better terminology to use there. What I will say is I did not foresee Georgia Tech bullying Florida State at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the football like they did. And to give you kind of a context of that and what exactly happened, let's go through one key stat line that I want to pay attention to that I feel like as a fan of a team that plays in the SEC, this is a stat that is you can almost look at this stat for every single football game and tell who won the football game without knowing who won the football game, and that is rushing yards. What I see is a Georgia Tech team that ran the ball 36 times, averaged over 5 yards a carry, and almost 200 yards on the ground. And what I see is a Florida State team that carried the ball for over 30 times, is 31 times, 3.2 yards a carry, 98 yards on the ground. What I can look at there is I can see that there was a clear-cut problem at the line of scrimmage with the Florida State Seminoles. And to me, to watch that football game, I did not expect Georgia Tech to do what they did up front to Florida State. We've heard all offseason about Florida State got embarrassed, in the Orange Bowl, and be whatever as it may, you can feel whatever way you want to feel about that game. I know I feel a certain way as a Georgia fan, but my bias aside, I feel like if you 100% felt like you were the biggest, baddest, team, and you got snubbed and you got left out, I feel like you probably should have done a little bit better job proving that you belonged where you said you did. And also, it also pointed something else out to me as well, something that I feel like has leaked over into this season, and that is the fact that Mike Norvell has a culture problem in Tallahassee. And I said it last year on Facebook, and I got absolutely grilled by Florida State fans for saying this. But when you look at that and what happened with that Seminole team last year, and how, they felt like they were snubbed, and they felt like they belonged in the college football playoff. Regardless of the fact that their starting quarterback got hurt, throw all that aside. The problem that I see with a team like Florida State last year before the Orange Bowl is a team that just laid down and died because they didn't get their way. And when I saw the way some of the players were acting on social media, and the way that some of the coaches were acting on social media, and a lot of the way the fans were acting, the fans were blindly defending, the players for not playing, which I get it. I'm not going to judge a kid that's slated to make millions of dollars at the next level and sign a, multi-million-dollar signing bonus with an NFL franchise. I'm not going to fault that kid if he decides that he doesn't want to play in a meaningless bowl game. I understand that. But on the other end of that spectrum, I can kind of see that. I can see the point that a lot of people were trying to make, like, well, you probably should have played at least some starters should have played. I mean, I understand guys like, Keon Coleman not playing. I mean, Keon Coleman was drafted in the higher rounds. I understand that. There was a couple other players on the defense that were drafted high, but I don't know the exact number. Maybe some of y'all can some comment, send me a text if you know me personally, whatever. Tell me how. I can't remember the exact count of how many players that Florida State was missing. I think it was 20-something players. And to me, when I see that, I automatically thought culture problem. And maybe that's a slight overreaction. Maybe it's not. But I saw culture problem. And what that did is bled over, I feel like, a little bit. And to me, two different cultures, Athens, Tallahassee, right now. The contrast could not be any greater or of any greater magnitude than it is between Georgia and Florida State right now, to use them as two examples. You look at a team in Athens that was arguably the best team in college football all year last year, except for one game that they lost by a field goal in the SEC championship against another top 5 team. And that team got left out. By all means, should have been there. We're one of the best teams. But didn't go. But still showed up in January and took care of business against Florida State. Or excuse me, late December, early January, whatever. Still took care of business in the bowl game. And then you see the team out of Tallahassee. Same circumstance. Felt like they belonged. They were a conference champion. Aside from Georgia, they were a conference champion. But you got left out. You should have proved it. But you didn't. And then you get beat by Georgia Tech in the first game to start your 2024 season, and that is not a good look for the program. It's not a good look for Mike Norvell, who, for all intents and purposes, there was a lot of people that felt like Florida State was going to be one of the teams to beat this year. I personally didn't. I felt like they lost way too much last year. And herein, it brings up another subject that I love talking about. Herein lies the problem with players and the transfer portal. Another contrast that I see with a lot of players is you see a lot of coaches get pieces from the transfer portal, not the whole team, or not a great portion of the team. And what I saw last year, when you look at the players that Mike Norvell had in Tallahassee, when you look at those players, none of those players hardly were recruited by Mike Norvell, and hardly any of those players were originally recruited to Florida State or went originally to Florida State. I mean, all your key pieces are transfer portal additions. Every single one of them. You know, your running back, you've got defensive ends, you've got linebackers, you've got corners, you've got safeties, you've got offensive linemen, defensive line. All across the board, you've got nothing but transfers. To me, that can't be healthy for a program long term. Because what you have is also, like I've said for the first few minutes of the show, a contrast in culture. And you have a team in Athens, most of those players have been recruited by Kirby Smart and company, recruited to play in Athens. And so therefore, you have more of a brotherhood or a connection, so to speak. That to me speaks volumes. To me, that team will beat a portal-built team 10 out of 10 times. The team that is recruited to play together, that is a brotherhood, that bleeds together, sweats together, goes through camps together, that team will beat a portal-built team every single time. So, enough of beating the dead horse. Florida State, the hangover apparently carried over to this season. It's unfortunate, but hey, with the expanded playoff, Seminole fans, don't get too down in the dumps because you still have a very good chance. All you got to do is pretty much win out. Don't lose another game. Easier said than done because you got, after that showing, 4 or 5 losses on the table now. After the showing with Georgia Tech. So I still feel like Florida State's a talented football team. I feel like they're young. I feel like it's gonna take them a few games to settle in. Unfortunately, they don't have that luxury. They got a match up Doak Campbell with Boston College on Monday night, on Labor Day. So that's maybe a game where they can kind of right the ship a little bit. If they come out and they win that game against Boston College and they win it by a couple touchdowns or more, maybe they right the ship a little bit, and the national media and all the sports media outlets and everybody, even people like me, quit doubting them. Maybe that's something that'll happen. And then they move on. They got Memphis, they got California, SMU, and then they have on October 5th, they got Clemson coming to Tallahassee. I feel like if Florida State wins the next four football games, and they beat Boston College, they beat Memphis, the beauty of it is 3 of their next 4 games are at home. At Doak Campbell, Boston College is in Tallahassee, Memphis is coming to Tallahassee, Cal's coming to Tallahassee. They got to go to SMU, so they got to go to Dallas. Not an overly crazy place to play, not a bad road trip. So ultimately the schedule is kind of in their favor. And their biggest games for the rest of the season, they got to go to Miami, they got to go to Notre Dame, and then at the end of the year, obviously, you've got the showdown with Florida, and that's in Tallahassee this year. So Seminole fans, don't hang your head. I feel like y'all will be fine. I feel like Florida State still finishes this year 10-2, 9-3 at the worst. I still feel like you have a realistic chance of being in the playoff, but if you lose 1 or maybe 2 more games, I feel like you have to lose them to ranked opponents. You have to lose them to the likes of Clemson and Notre Dame. You can't lose another game to if Florida State loses to Boston College Monday night, they're done. I don't see them recovering from that. They could lose to Boston College and win out, and I don't see it. No world do I see that in. So, but moving on, this weekend slate, we got a lot of big games, obviously. Talked about earlier, Georgia Clemson kicking things off, regardless of how I feel about the noon kickoff. Don't even get me started, because I can fill up a 5-hour episode about how I wasn't too crazy about it. I heard the chairman and CEO of the Peach Bowl. I believe it's a Peach Bowl. But I heard him saying the other day that the reasoning behind the Georgia-Clemson game kicking off at noon, and I heard it on Dog Nation Daily with Brandon Adams, so I'll kind of give you a short synopsis. I don't have the recording on hand, but I'll give you a short synopsis of basically what he said. So basically the thought behind having the Georgia-Clemson game at noon was this. The Georgia-Clemson game is going to produce big ratings even if it's played at noon. Well, then after that game will flow on ABC, ESPN. The ratings, they're hoping the ratings that Georgia-Clemson produces will carry right over into Miami and Florida at 3:30. And then those ratings will hold until the night game, Notre Dame and Texas A&M, and they're hoping that they wanted the biggest game at noon to hopefully hold the level of the ratings all the way through that nighttime slot with A&M and Notre Dame. I kind of get it, but then again, I just don't understand how the number one team in the country and a team that's won 2 of the last 3 national championships kicks off at noon. Noon has never been, and then everybody says, well, the big noon kickoff. Big noon kickoff does good ratings because that's the way it's been for years. Here in the South, SEC fans and ACC fans of teams like Florida State and Clemson and everything else, we enjoy night games down here. I've never in my life heard anybody say, man, I tell you what, I can't wait for that noon kickoff in Athens Saturday. I mean, noon kickoffs are great. Every day in Athens is great. Every Saturday in Athens is great. We could kick off at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it's still a Saturday in Athens. It's heaven on earth. But if you've never been to Sanford Stadium, you've never been between the hedges for a night kickoff. That's, and even then, even in Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz where the game's being played Saturday, I mean, even a night kickoff there, still electric. But I'll get off my soapbox because it's not like they're going to hear me and go, well, Colby Allen on After the Whistle said we need to change the kickoff time, so let's do it. That's not going to happen. But I just wanted to provide a lot of people that are going to listen to this with some clarity as to what I heard on another show, and I heard someone say that this is why. So whether you buy it or not, that's up to you. So, but anyway, we'll kick it off with that. So Georgia-Clemson, a game that is very near and dear to my heart. I will say this. I will say that I have seen online that I have seen a lot of Georgia fans not give Clemson the credit that they deserve or that they need. I would say deserve, yes. This is still Clemson University. This is still a Dabo Swinney coached football team. They've got an experienced quarterback. Clemson's known to have always a good front seven on the defensive side of the football. So I think where we're going to find out a lot about this football game, we're going to find out a lot the first few possessions of this football game, and that's going to be if Georgia can get a push at the line of scrimmage and Georgia can move the football effectively on the ground. I think that's where we're going to see what Clemson's about this year. Because the reason I say that is Clemson is also very young on their front seven. They, from years past, the last couple of years, they're not as experienced and they're not as deep at those positions at like defensive tackle, linebacker, edge rusher, things of that sort. But they do have a lot of young talent. And young talent sometimes it's not an anomaly, but it's one of those things where you look at a young talented roster like they're going to have on the defensive side of the football, and you just don't really know what to expect. Barrett Carter is a monster. Number 0 for Clemson. Look out for him. they've just got some guys that they've brought in that raise, some question marks. If Georgia's able to establish the line of scrimmage early, able to run the football, I feel like this is a game that Georgia could win handily. And I don't mean win it by 30 or 40 points. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that if Georgia can control the line of scrimmage, I feel like this is a game that will be close at halftime, somewhere along the lines of 17-13, 17-10, 14-10, somewhere in that neighborhood, I feel like. But then I feel like in the second half, the experience on that Georgia offensive line, because Georgia's going to have probably one of, if not the best offensive lines in the country this year. So the experience that Georgia has on that front is going to be detrimental to the success in the second half. Kirby prides his team on being physical, being tough, and just making the other team not quit, but wearing them out, leaning on them, pounding the rock, leaning on them, and ultimately gassing the other team out. And I feel like this is a game that could have that kind of, where they could have that kind of game plan coming in to where Georgia's going to lean on Clemson. It's going to be close at halftime. I still feel like it's going to be a respectable showing for Clemson. I do not feel like in any stretch of the imagination where a lot of Georgia fans are saying, where a lot of Georgia fans online are saying like Georgia's going to win by 30 points. I do not see that at all. Unless Clemson comes out and commits 3 or 4 turnovers in the first, half, and Georgia capitalizes on them and goes up big at the half, and Clemson just rolls over and dies. I just don't see that happening. Like I said, I see this being a tight game at the half, and then I see it being I see Georgia up 14-10 at halftime, and then I see a Georgia win 31-16. That's what I'm seeing. I mean, that's kind of my thought of it. Is I feel like there's going to be a lot of emotion in the first half. There's going to be a lot of body blows thrown in the first half, and I feel like Clemson's going to hang right there with Georgia in the first half, and then I think in the second half, I think you're going to see the experience of Georgia's O-line take over, and also Georgia's defense, which is going to be improved, I feel like, from this year as far as from a rushing defense standpoint, because let's be honest, as a Georgia fan, last year's rush defense was not up to the standard that Kirby has established since he's been in Athens. So I feel like that's going to be better this year. So controlling the line of scrimmage, it's the same recipe that Georgia Tech used to beat Florida State. Controlling the line of scrimmage. It all comes back to that. There's a reason why spread teams don't win national championships. There's a reason. Most and spread teams do sometimes win national championships. Don't run and tell everybody that I said they don't, because sometimes they do. But even you look at teams that were very potent on offense over the last decade. You had a Bama team that was really good on offense. You had LSU with Joe Burrow and Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. You had monster offense. They still controlled the line of scrimmage. They didn't have the most, hard-nosed defense. They weren't going to shut you out. They weren't going to hold you to less than 10 points. But they still controlled the line of scrimmage on the offensive side of the football. They gave Burrow time to throw the football, and they opened up lanes for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So I don't think that it's some big secret that when you control the line of scrimmage, you win football games. And that, to me, is why I love the culture that's been established in Athens by Kirby Smart, being tough, that pro-style offense. And, I feel like a lot of teams are trying to replicate that. Kirby, I'm not proud enough to admit, Kirby got it from Saban. Kirby got that hard nose, Now, be honest with you, Kirby was his own coach before he got hired by Nick Saban. The fact that Saban made Kirby is asinine, because Kirby was his own Kirby was his own coach before Saban hired him. Now, did he learn a lot from Saban? Absolutely. But the thought and the notion that Kirby Smart was just nothing before Nick Saban hired him is ridiculous. That's just, if you hear anybody say that, that's just Bama fans seeking validation, trying to make it seem like that, Georgia wouldn't be what Georgia is right now without Nick Saban. But, in a way, he taught Kirby a lot. I get the point there, but Kirby's his own person, Kirby's his own coach, and Kirby was his own coach before Saban hired him. So, off that soapbox, I think that if you're betting this game, if you're picking this game, if you're betting this game, I feel like 13.5. I honestly feel like it's a pretty good line. Like I said, I'm looking somewhere in the neighborhood of 31-16 Georgia. Now on the other end of that, it could be a low scoring affair, but we'll see. It just week one, man, it's such a mystery. You just don't know. Like I said, there's so many question marks, especially on the offensive side of the ball with Clemson. You just don't know. So moving on to the next marquee matchup, I would say marquee matchup, not really, but Penn State and West Virginia, which is a very intriguing football game that kicks off the same time as Georgia Clemson, and it's in here's the big thing. It's in West Virginia. Penn State, to me, has been a very underwhelming football team since James Franklin got there. When Penn State hired James Franklin from Vanderbilt, we all heard that Penn State was going to be formidable in the Big Ten, and they were going to compete for Big Ten titles and compete for national championships, and they've yet to get over that hump since he's been there. I'm not saying he's a terrible coach, but I'm saying that I feel like just every single year, Penn State to me is in the same category with Notre Dame and maybe Miami, where every single year they are overhyped. That's to me, that's, in my opinion, that's the three most overhyped teams in college football every single year. Penn State, Notre Dame, and Miami. Every year we hear about, the U's back, and then they lose 4 or 5 games. And then we hear Penn State might win the Big Ten, and then they have a showing like they did against Ohio State last year. It's just not, to me, it's not I don't think James Franklin and Penn State is a very good mix, if I put it that way. I think they could find somebody a lot better. I just think that it's kind of like a Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M relationship type deal, where I just think he just underachieves every single year and we just give him a pass. But Jimbo Fisher was 2 years from him. He should have been fired 2 years before they fired him. I think James Franklin should have been fired 2 or 3 years ago. Penn State, obviously the name, you're going to recruit well. You're going to get dynamic and very good athletes. But the fact of the matter is you're going to win 8, 9, 10 games a year. But you're going to lose to Ohio State and Michigan every single year. And here lately, they've lost to Ohio State, Michigan, and then there's always like a sneaky little loss in there that somebody they shouldn't lose to. Somebody like West Virginia. Enter this weekend. And enter why I think West Virginia, I think this game is a lot closer than, and I mean, Penn State's only favored by 8, but I'm hammering the under on that football game if I'm betting it. Week 1 on the road against West Virginia, I'm hammering the under because Penn State, to me, has been one of the most underwhelming football teams of the last decade. So therefore, I think they win, but I think they win a very close one. I think they get a scare in week 1. I'm thinking like a 27-24, 28-27, something along those lines. I don't see them blowing West Virginia out. So moving on, don't really have anything other than there's like 4 or 5 marquee games that I want to talk about. Obviously, nobody gives a crap about, Chattanooga and Tennessee. Nobody cares about Akron and Ohio State. Another intriguing game. And this is actually my upset pick. As bad as it pains me to say it, this is actually my upset pick for the weekend. I actually have 2 upset picks. Miami going on the road week 1 with all of these expectations and all of this pressure on their shoulders going into the swamp to face Florida. And I will say this, as a diehard Georgia fan, been a Georgia fan my whole life, I am a Gator hater through and through, 1,000%. And it pains me to say this, but I think Billy Napier gets a signature win on Saturday in the swamp against Miami. The reason I say this is 2 things. The crowd. If you've never been in Ben Hill Griffin Stadium and you've never been in the swamp, I can tell you this. Those people are nuts. That has got to be one of the rowdiest places in the SEC. That's got to be one of the rowdiest places to play football as a team on the road, like Miami, going to Gainesville to play Florida. I feel like it's a tall order. Florida, I feel like, is going to have a little bit stingier defense than they have in the last few years. I feel like they're going to be a little bit better against the run. And, who knows? Miami has so many transfers. It's kind of like a question mark, like with Florida State. And I feel like this Miami-Florida game is kind of very resembling of the Florida State-Georgia Tech game. Even though that one was in Ireland and Florida State wasn't playing in Atlanta, it kind of has the same feel to me, to where Miami going on the road, playing Florida in the swamp, I feel like Florida gets it done. And I feel like it's a tight game. I don't feel like Florida runs away with it, but I feel like Florida wins. Maybe they score with less than a minute left to play and go up and then hold Miami and stop Miami, or they kick a field goal as time expires to win it. But I've got Florida winning. And I think this is going to be a very low-scoring affair. I don't think this is going to be a game where, they're going to either team's going to score 40 points or 30 points for that matter. So I think Florida gets it done, and I think Florida wins this game 24-23 over Miami, and Billy Napier gets somewhat of a signature win. I mean, it's 19th ranked team in the country, but still be a big win to start the season. And to be honest, after that, Florida's got a pretty favorable schedule. If they beat Miami, they start the season 1-0. They got Samford coming to Gainesville. There's 2-0. Then they got A&M coming to Gainesville. That could very well be a win. It's 3-0. Then you got Mississippi State. That's 4-0. You got UCF. That's potentially 5-0. And you're looking potentially at a 5-0 Florida Gators football team going to Knoxville to face Tennessee on October 12th. That would be pretty impressive. As a Georgia fan, I'd have to tip my hat to them. And I'm going to hear it from my friends that are Florida fans for sure. So, moving on, we got the night game. And so much to say about this. I got 2 more games we'll cover, but I got Notre Dame, Texas A&M, and what I will say about this football game is I will say kind of the same general idea I have with the Florida-Miami game, and that is Notre Dame and A&M, Notre Dame going on the road to a loud and very hostile environment. It is no secret throughout the SEC that Texas A&M and the 12th man is one of the most intimidating environments to play in all of college football. And I got, Notre Dame going there on the road first weekend of the season, night game. I remember, quick story, I remember a few years ago, I was up in North Carolina visiting my friend Cole, and I remember it was a few weeks into the college football season, and I remember going up there and watching Texas A&M beat Alabama, which at the time was a huge win. And I watched A&M beat Alabama on a field goal last second to win. Huge upset, statement win for Jimbo Fisher. It was big time. And as a Georgia fan here over the last, decade, we've kind of grown to really loathe Alabama, so it was very pleasing for me to watch Alabama get beat. So I say that to say, very intimidating place to play. I feel like Notre Dame has a lot of experience. They have, Notre Dame, what is Notre Dame kind of known for? They're known for physicality. They produce a lot of big-time NFL offensive linemen. So the question mark for Marcus Freeman and his squad is going to be, can they run the football? And that's going to be the biggest question mark, is how, since the hire of Mike Elko in College Station, what adjustments have been made to this defense? And is Notre Dame going to be able to establish the line of scrimmage and run the football? If they can't run the football and they don't establish the line of scrimmage, you're looking at another upset. You're looking at another A&M upset. If Notre Dame can run the football and they can take the crowd out of it early, maybe go up a couple scores, then I think that maybe you can power your way through a win in one of the most hostile, if not the most hostile, environment in college football. But it's not happening, because I feel like A&M is going to make a statement win. They're going to make a statement. They're going to get a statement win with Mike Elko in his first game as the head coach of Texas A&M. I think they're going to take down Notre Dame. We got the point spread total at 46.5. I kind of like that, and I like A&M to beat Notre Dame 23-20. And actually A&M is actually favored in this game, so it wouldn't technically be an upset. A&M, I think the line as of earlier today I saw was 3 points, so that's what I'm going with, 23-20. I got A&M beating Notre Dame in College Station. Moving on, final game kind of the weekend, final big-time matchup, USC-LSU, and I feel like this game is going to produce a lot of points because, let's be honest, you got Lincoln Riley on one side, then you got Brian Kelly on the other side. Neither one of them is known for really giving a crap about defense. Brian Kelly maybe more than Lincoln Riley. I'll give him a little bit of credit on that. But I will say this. I think there will be a lot of points scored in this football game, and I think the fact that I'm looking at ESPN bets right now, 64.5. I feel like that's way too low. I feel like hammer the over on that, because I feel like both of these teams are scoring at least 34 points apiece. But the intriguing part about this is going to be, and I know this is something that's said a lot, and it's something that is said a lot at times when it comes to, teams that are, high-powered offensively like USC is, and like LSU's supposed to be. I mean, LSU, they got Garrett Nussmeier. They don't have Jaden Daniels anymore. I still think they're going to be a pretty potent offense because Brian Kelly is more of a offensive mind. What I will say is it's going to come down to who makes the stops at the right time. And what this might come down to is say, they kick off, say LSU wins the coin toss, LSU gets the ball first, and LSU scores first. And let's say LSU has the ball before halftime and they go down and scored, go up, double digits or something. It's going to be one of those things where offensive possessions are going to have to be strategically placed in certain areas, because I feel like if, say there's 7 minutes left to halftime and LSU's winning by a touchdown, and let's say they force a stop on USC punts with 3 or 4 minutes left in the half, and LSU's able to get in field goal range and kick that field goal and go up 10. To me, that's the little things that I feel like will make the biggest difference in this football game going forward to the end, is who can get the timely stops. I'm not saying that USC is going to come in and be a wrecking crew of a defense and they're going to be able to, produce tackles for loss and sacks and this and that. And I'm not saying LSU is going to do it either. But I will say I trust LSU's defense a little bit more. And this is a weird spot, because this is a weird pick for me, because I trust Lincoln Riley as an offensive mind more than I trust Brian Kelly, but then I trust LSU's defense more. The old mantra, the old saying rings true: defense wins championships, defense wins football games. I think LSU gets just a couple timely stops, maybe one in the first half and one in the second half, to separate them from USC. And I think LSU goes on to win this football game, and I'm going to say 41-34 LSU. That's what I'm going to say, 41-34 LSU. So that's my pick for that one. I'm going to have to lock that one in before I change my mind, because I want to change my mind, because I know that Lincoln Riley's offenses are capable of putting up 50 points, but I'm going to trust LSU's defense on that one. That's what I'm going to say. So but that's all for this week, and I hope y'all enjoy the week 1 college football. I know week 0 produced a shocker, and like we talked about earlier, in Georgia Tech beating Florida State. But week 1 coming up, excited, a lot of big games. Catch y'all next week, and we'll recap everything. See y'all later.